welcome to another video, and welcome to my sofa. Normally I'm sat here in this armchair when I'm both reading or filming, but today it's grey, it's cold, it's quite windy and rainy, so I just felt like cozying up on the sofa. I'm going to be hopefully reading a book after this because I have given myself the day off today because I'm quite tired and I really needed it, so that is why I'm doing it today. But I have thought that first what I would do is just film a really quick TBR video. Now we are already into June and I'm quite bad at filming TBRs before the month they're due, so if you are taking part in the TBR Reading Spa, which I will be talking about in a moment, I'd really recommend that you check out Kerry's channel, which I will link to below, because she's much better than me at actually posting the videos on time. But what I'm going to do in this video is just really quickly talk you through the prompts for the TBR Reading Spa for June and what I have picked off my shelf for that. I'm also going to give you a little bit of an update on where I am with the number of unread books on my shelves, because I did want to try and reduce that this year and to try not to buy any books this year. Borrow books from library, yes, but try not to bring any new books on your shelves, Jem. That was my plan. And I'm also just going to tell you about a couple of books in addition to the TBR Reading Spa that I would like to get round to. I know I won't, but I want to mention them in this video because I want to start kind of mentioning a few more, recommending a few more titles, just bringing them to people's attention, that kind of thing. So I'm looking over to my left here where my little graphic is for the TBR Reading Spa. If you don't know what it is by now, it's just a fun way for us to give you some prompts to kind of help you narrow down what you might want to read this month. There's a whole quiz which you can do, which is just a fun kind of fun little like magazine style quiz, which you can completely manipulate to bring out whatever prompts you want. Now, in the description box will be links to the Google Drive where you can download the graphic for this month. You can also get the graphics for all months. So if you want to have a look at future months or past months, if you haven't done it and you want to have a look at some of those questions and prompts, you can have a look at those. I know some people like to plan their whole reading year and know exactly what they're going to read, so I know some people have done that, and you can if you want to, but you can also just look at them every month. So if I don't get one of these videos out on time, you can see what the prompts are for that month and pick one. But I'm going to put it on the screen now really quickly, and it is just basically a question for which there is 3 possible answers which we have given you, which leads you to another possible question, and then it leads you to the prompt. You can just look at the prompts, decide which one of them you want to pick, or pick all 3, or you can use the question to narrow it down. So this month the question is, how do you celebrate books you've loved? Do you recommend them to everyone? Do you reread them? Or do you attend an author event? That then leads to other questions, which then leads to the prompts. So for me, obviously I recommend books to everybody. I do it in the library when I work in the public library, and I do it on YouTube as well. I recommend books to everyone. I don't tend to reread very much. I think it might seem like I do because I'm always rereading Thomas Hardy books, but they aren't necessarily books that I love. I just really like Thomas Hardy and his style and what he does with books. I wouldn't say that they're favourites, all of them, although some of them are. I think him and probably Philippe Besson seems to be the one author that I'm always rereading his books for some reason, because they're fantastic. I don't know what it is, I'm just always rereading them. And let's have a look. The other option was attend an author event. I don't tend to attend author events. I think it's because of the ones that I've seen that I'm quite interested in. I always find them quite expensive, and I don't have a lot of money, so attending author events isn't really something that I do, so that's probably not an option for me. I'm going to grab my laptop now because I can't actually see that far away, to have a look at these small questions. So if I select, I recommend books to everyone, it takes you to the question of, do you like to wait for reviews before buying a book? I would say no. I tend not to wait for reviews. I tend not to read reviews or watch reviews, in-depth ones, until after I've read a book. The only exception will be if I get halfway through a book or a little bit into it and I'm not sure what I'm thinking of it. I sometimes look up reviews to see what other people have said, to see if other people are having the same vibe as I am. It won't change whether I continue reading the book or not, but I do tend to do that. I don't know why I do that. Just really quickly, just some of the other questions because I think they're interesting, is the question for if you reread books is, do you buy multiple editions of favourite books? I would say I mean, I have a Thomas Hardy collection of books. So yes, I do. But I also have many different editions of Thomas Hardy books that I don't like. Like, I have so many editions of The Mayor of Casterbridge, and it's definitely one of my least favourite Thomas Hardy books. And the question for if you attend an author event, do you queue to get your book signed? I have done in the past, but sometimes I have just snuck out because I haven't bought the book. Because maybe I decided not to in the end. But the 3 prompts basically that these questions lead you to is to read a book about identity, read a queer book, or read a book that you hope will bring you joy. So I think I've got one book which will fit for the book that I think will bring me joy, I think. And then I've got 2 books which actually I think fit both the other prompts. But the one I think I am most likely to get round to is a Christopher Isherwood book, and it is called The Memorial. And the only thing I know about this book is the very small blurb on the back. But I heard about this through my studies, actually, because I was looking for books which were about the kind of a generation of the 1930s whose fathers may have fought in the First World War, and kind of what they thought about that kind of legacy. So that's kind of something that I'm studying. And Christopher Isherwood has written quite a lot about this, but this book was then recommended. Now, obviously it's a fiction book, and what I was looking for was non-fiction, but then when I saw it, I thought, I'm going to get hold of this. So this is about a young man called Eric, whose father fought in the First World War. I don't know if he died in the war, because it refers to him as being a heroic father. So that gives me the impression that maybe he died in the war, and that's why Eric kind of is torn between wanting to kind of emulate his father and another choice in life. And that other choice in life is to follow in the footsteps of not his heroic war hero father, but his father's friend, who it describes on the back here as being roguish, and he survived the war only to throw himself into gay life in Berlin, which I think sounds really intriguing. So it sounds queer, and it sounds like it's about identity. It's about this young man trying to kind of forge his way in the world and decide what his identity will be. So I think that sounds really interesting. I think this will be the one I'm most likely to get round to. The other one I think is probably less likely to get around to, but again, I think this does fit for a queer book, but also a book about identity, and that is The New Life by Tom Crew. I originally read, I think it was the first 2 chapters of this, because I had the audiobook when it first came out from the library. I had put a hold on the physical copy of the book, but the wait list was so long, I then put a reservation on the audiobook as well, and again, the list was really long for that. I got the book, but I think it came through at a time when I was just really busy and I didn't have time to listen to it very much. And I listened to the first maybe 3 or 4 chapters, really loved it, but then it automatically returned to the library, and I went back onto I put myself back on the holds list, but then it was so long again that when I saw this in a second-hand bookshop, I immediately grabbed it. So this is the hardback. It's actually signed by the author, but it's signed to Alison. I don't know who Alison is, but she obviously didn't want to keep this book. But the first chapter is quite gay. Features a dream sequence, which is quite gay. But this is about, now, forgive me, I'm sure you'll correct me, but I cannot quite remember everything about what this plot is about. But I think it's about it's a true story of 2 very real men who met each other and wrote a book about homosexuality or about sexual identity. And I think it was in the late 19th century, so in 1894, yes, they decided to write a book together. And I am kind of tangentially studying what they wrote and the 2 of them for my PhD. So I wonder if reading a fiction book about this is maybe not a good idea at the moment when I'm also researching non-fiction and writing about it. I don't know. So I don't know if I will read the fiction book, but it fits these prompts and I need to read it, so I picked it off the shelf. But I believe that one of the men is gay, he's married to a woman, and the other one I think is very understanding, and I think his wife is having a relationship with a woman, or I totally misremembered that. But anyway, they write this book about how homosexuality should not be criminalised, should not be demonised, and should be socially acceptable. So I think this sounds really interesting. I believe that this won the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction and was very, very popular a few years ago. And that's why it was on my radar. I really want to read it. The final book that I picked out I think will bring me joy. Of all the books on my shelves, this was literally the only one I could find that I thought might bring me joy, so I decided to pick it out. I have mentioned this book before on my channel because it was on one of my videos for, do I even want to read these books anymore? And I read the first chapter and it went immediately back on my shelf because I definitely do. But this is The Pattern in the Carpet by Margaret Drabble, which I believe is a memoir of sorts about her life through jigsaws. And it's about like the history of jigsaws and the importance of jigsaws in her life and in the life of other people. Sounds wild, sounds great, sounds completely crazy, sounds really unusual, but also it's about jigsaws, surely. Surely it will bring me joy, surely. I will also be reading, as well as one of those, I will also be reading a Thomas Hardy book this month. So we're on the penultimate book for the Thomas Hardy read along. And for that, I'll be reading The Well-Beloved. It is my least favourite Thomas Hardy, but it is very, very short. If you're interested in reading what is most people's least favourite Thomas Hardy book, I will drop a link in the description box to the introductory video for The Well-Beloved. And really intrigued to see what I think of it this time round, on my third time of trying to read it and hopefully liking it. Miracles may happen. So there are two more books that I want to mention. One of them because I saw it on my shelf the other day, and I just thought, you know what, I am really in the mood to read this book right now. And because I love talking about books and recommending books, even when I haven't read them, but just highlighting books and bringing them to people's attention, I just want to mention this one. So I definitely mentioned this once before on my channel. I don't remember when, possibly when I bought it, which was last year. So this book is by Mathalinda Nabugodi and it's called The Trembling Hand, Reflections of a Black Woman in the Romantic Archive. This came to my attention because I thought it might be the kind of book that might end up on the Women's Prize long list for non-fiction, and it did not. But I bought a copy of it because I really want to make sure that I read it. But this is about, I mean, it's kind of like the subtitle would tell you. It is about the sort of the Romantic period. It's about the kind of Romantic poets, people like Keats, Wordsworth, Shelley, and how their writing was influenced in subtle and not so subtle ways by the slave trade, and how you can see examples of that both within their published writing and within the archive, and what it's like to be a black researcher, a black woman researching that time period where racism and slavery is kind of swept under the carpet as if it had absolutely no impact, but it did have a huge impact. And I think that's what this book is hopefully going to kind of explain to me and teach me a little bit more about. I don't know anything about the Romantic period, I don't really know much about those poets and the kind of poets and artists of that period, but I'm really interested also to kind of read about her reflections of kind of working with archival material, because I do that a lot, and it's just really interesting to read other people's perspectives. This is also a book I think about identity, so it could fit one of the prompts for this month, but I really want to make sure that I get around to reading this very, very soon, because it sounds like an absolutely wonderful book. The back of it is just absolutely covered in praise for this, including from people like Honoré Fanonne Jeffers, who wrote the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. Come to Being also loved this book. And Emma Smith, who's a lecturer in Shakespeare, but also very well known for writing really readable books about Shakespeare, loved this book. So that's like high praise indeed. Actually, Come to Being is mentioned on the front, and I really love his writing. But those are quite a few people that I'm familiar with. So really want to get around to reading that. But I don't know if I will this month, but certainly as a mood reader, that kind of leapt out to me. I'm saying that I don't think I'll have time because this month is incredibly busy for my PhD. It's like one of 2 months, because like June, July are just insane, absolutely insane. The last book I just want to mention will help me talk about my TBR project. So I want to reduce the number of unread books on my shelf or shelves, because there are so many of them, they go over many shelves. The reason for that is entirely personal. I've talked about this before. Absolutely no shade to anyone else if they want lots of unread books on their shelves. I know lots of people like having a really big library to choose from, but for me, there are so many books on my shelves that have been there for quite a while. I reduced it to 0 a couple of years ago, and it's just kind of crept back up again. And we will probably be moving house in the next year or so, hopefully. And I don't want to have to take a whole bunch of unread books that I'm not sure I want to read or not. I don't want to have to move them to another house. And also, What I find now is that when I go into the library, either when I'm at work and just perusing the shelves, I don't peruse the shelves at work. I obviously am working. But you know, sometimes when you're shelving, you see another book and you think, oh. But what I tend to do is I tend to think, oh, I'd really like to read that book, but I don't have time because I've got all these other books on my shelf that I want to read. And they like loom over me. And I know other people, like my wife says this, that she borrows more books from the library, way more books than I do, even though she's got unread books on the shelf here, because as soon as you borrow a book from the library, you know, you've got to return it. So it kind of pushes you to read it. So she borrows a lot more books. And that way doesn't really mind that there's still lots of unread books on the shelf here. But I don't know what it is for me. I just feel like I don't really enjoy perusing the library shelves in the way that I used to. I still borrow lots of books from the library. It tends to be things that have come to my attention because maybe book prizes or you know, someone has recommended something and I decide that I suddenly like really want to read it, and so I'll get it from the library. But I don't tend to peruse the shelves in the same way that I used to, just serendipitously picking things up, and I'd really like to get back to doing that. And I think for me, my block is that I have so many unread books I really want to read, so I want to kind of focus on those, and that's the main reason for me reducing my TBR. So my goal for this year was to try not to buy any books. There is only one book that I have added to my TBR this year, which I will talk about in a second. And I started the year with 114 unread books. I now have 115. So I have left 91, including this book. And I think that's not too bad actually. For this hasn't been a huge reading year for me, not as much as some years. So I'm actually quite happy with having 91 books left. Not including obviously any of these because I don't know if I'm going to read them. So yeah, I think I'm quite happy with that. That's quite manageable. And the book that I've added to my TBR is actually one that I paid for last year when I pre-ordered it from a bookshop, and it arrived the other day in the post. So I am quite excited. This book could also fit reading a queer book, reading a book about identity, and perhaps reading a book that will give me joy. Oh my God, does it fit all three prompts? I feel like it's going to make me sad as well as joy because it's about George Michael and I adore him. But I did mention this last year when I put when I heard about it, and then I put a pre-order in for it. So in case you don't know, I am a huge fan of George Michael. He is one of those kind of singers who has always been in my life, because I remember buying a Wham record when I was about 4, I think. I remember begging my mummy, please buy me this record. We win this little single. I don't remember which one it was. Might have been Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Anyway, he's been in my life, my whole life. And obviously I'm completely devastated that he is no longer with us. But this book is by Satnam Sanghera. Now, I haven't read any of his other books. I've heard great praise about his other books. So I know he wrote, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. So his memoir, The Boy with the Top Knot, was very, very well received, and I'd always wanted to read it, but I tend not to prioritise memoirs for some reason, I don't know. But he also wrote a really brilliant book, which I think is probably higher up my priority list, called Empireland, which is about, well, it's a non-fiction book, and it's about the British Empire and the history of it. I think he's written a couple of books about that topic as well. But this is about his kind of love of George Michael and the importance of George Michael. It's the subtitle, so the book is called Tonight the Music Seems So Loud, and it's subtitled The Meaning of George Michael. And I think it's kind of also about the importance of celebrating the things that we love, even if other people think they're really naff, because there is a certain group of people or a certain kind of I don't know if they're a distinct group of people, but certainly there's lots of people I think who think that George Michael isn't a serious musician, or wasn't a serious musician, or wasn't particularly talented. They kind of judge him based on some of his more, let's say, throwaway pop songs, although they are very, very successful. But I think there's lots of people who don't necessarily love his music and think of him as a bit of a joke. And certainly the kind of things that happened in his life and towards the end of his life as well, he is treated, I think, by a lot of, especially the music press, as not being very serious, and lots of kind of wider press and wider media as not being a very serious musician. And that can sometimes kind of lead fans to maybe not really emphasise. I've never had a problem telling everyone what a huge George Michael fan I am, but I believe it can be a problem for some people. And I think for Statham Sangera, I've read a little bit of this when it arrived the other day. I read the introduction and I think he had an issue with it as well. It is quite difficult to kind of stake your claim and love the things that you love and talk about them, which is why I think this might be a joyful book. But I think it's also the importance of, you know, the history of someone who is like the son of an immigrant and making an incredibly successful career in the UK and still being quite humble whilst also being massively big-headed. The kind of juxtaposition of those two, but the kind of importance of music in our lives as well. I'm talking about this book like I've read it. I have no idea what this is about, but I get all that from the blurb and the introduction. And this really feels like something that might actually bring me joy. So I feel like I might want to read this. It's quite a small book as well. So I'm quite intrigued to get around to hopefully reading this quite soon. So like I said, there is 91 books now left on my TBR. I would love to know if you are reading anything for the TBR Reading Spa. If you have filmed a video about it or I've done a post anywhere on social media, do let me know, of course. And let me know what you plan on reading in June. What is it like in your part of the world, the weather at the moment? We had a heat wave and now it's turned miserable and grey. My plants are very confused. My plants on my balcony, they don't know what to do with themselves. Do you want to be warm? Do you want to be cold? Do you want to be windy? It doesn't know. So let me know how you are, what you are reading, how everything is going. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.